On today's episode of Locked On Oilers, we connect with Jared from the Locked On Hurricanes to talk about the last time the Edmonton Oilers were in the Stanley Cup Finals, heading into the Edmonton Oilers' most anticipated season in a very long time. All that and much more on today's episode of Locked On Oilers.
You're Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Caniacs, as we all know, the Carolina Hurricanes are fixing to bring in their 25th season in Raleigh, and probably the best season that they've had is the 2006 season where they won the Stanley Cup. And with me today to recap that playoff run is Brett from Locked On Oilers. How are you doing today, Brett?
Not too bad. Just ready to recount the saddest days of my life. How about yourself?
I am ready to recap one of the happiest days of my life.
Naturally.
Yeah, so obviously, this was, I believe, 17 years ago now. So we're obviously a bit older than we were then. I was 9 years old at the time, and you were a kid as well. So, coming at it from a child's perspective of watching that, I remember myself, obviously, remembering, the playoffs beforehand, but, like the one I remembered vividly was Game 7. And when, the final horn hit, and Doc Emmerich's call and just all that stuff. I remember all that stuff vividly. I'm running around my parents' living room, around the coffee table, the old fatback TV that was like 1,000 pounds, running around. I remember everyone hoisting the cup, "We Are the Champions" playing, and all that stuff. I remember that vividly, and it definitely feels like, I mean, you can go back to the season they actually played before, because the season before this was the lockout season. Tampa had won before that, the season before that. I think Detroit before then, and Dallas had won a couple years ahead of that as well. And it really feels like that gets overlooked when people talk about hockey succeeding in non-traditional markets. You had like these, and then the season after, Anaheim won the cup as well. Of these non-traditional markets becoming a force. The Hurricanes, rocky playoff history post Stanley Cup win, but I feel like that doesn't get talked about enough.
100%. I think the 2000s, I think especially for our generation, for a little bit of the last generation as well, I think was a peak, not necessarily the peak, maybe even the peak of Stanley Cup Finals. I mean, you go and look back at the Tampa Bay Lightning and the Calgary Flames, and you see, was that goal kicked in? Was it not kicked in? You got that kind of debate. You got the start, not necessarily even the start, kind of the middle of the Detroit Red Wings era. And that all kicked off, no pun intended, with Brett Hull's skate in the crease. And it really just solidified fantastic final after fantastic final after fantastic final after fantastic final. And then guess what? Another fantastic final all through the 2000s. And I completely agree. I think the Edmonton Carolina one gets not necessarily pushed under the carpet, but it's just the one that people don't bring up too often. I think it's because there wasn't too much firepower. There were 2 8 seeds, which should really be the story in itself. The 2 8 seeds, the two teams.
Actually, Carolina was the second seed.
You were the second seed?
Yeah, Carolina was the second seed that year,
which is you were 8th.
No
way.
I think the season they squeaked back in when they ended the playoff draw. I believe they're the 8th seed then. When they went to the conference final. I think that may have been it. But
wow. So you guys were that did not dawn on me, and just how good the Hurricanes were. And you take a look at their team and you go, wow, like you can tell why. And there's just so much going good for the Carolina Hurricanes. I remember when the Edmonton Oilers got their playoff spot. And you want to talk about being kids at the time.
Mhm.
I was in third grade, and I always like to draw the hockey players. The hockey players were the coolest thing to me, just the aesthetic of hockey players. And I would draw the players and whatever. And as soon as the Oilers made the playoffs, it was big here in Edmonton. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to make a book. I'm just going to
Mhm.
write this little book as a third grader. And this book that I made was the Edmonton Oilers winning the Stanley Cup in Game 7 because of a shootout. I didn't know the overtime rules then, but
Yeah.
due to a shootout against the Carolina Hurricanes. And that was right before the playoffs started. And ever since then, I was always like, oh, wow, I must be a genius. But no, I remember just, if there was an East team, it was the Carolina Hurricanes. And then y'all became my biggest enemy for a little while.
Yeah, I definitely can understand that. And obviously, as with every championship team, there's always going to be, well, they wouldn't have won if, this person got hurt, if that call was made and stuff like that. Kind of a lot of folks will go back to that conference final against Buffalo, and, say that, oh, the Hurricane Stanley Cup, needs an asterisk by it, and everything like that. But, again, you just look at the team and the run that they had. Obviously, Cam Ward won the Conn Smythe, coming out as a rookie goaltender, just playing his absolute mind off. You had Eric Stahl, who was still in the early days of his career, leading the team in scoring. And then, of course, big thing is, the veterans on the team. That team was stacked with vets. You had Rod Brindamore, Glenn Wesley. Oh, God, who else did you
Dougie
have?
Waite.
Yep, Dougie Waite. Yep, he was the next one. You
Been.
had Aaron Ward as well.
Yeah.
Justin Williams, he was still early-ish in his career as well.
The
And they
start of
had
Mr. Game 7.
Yep, that was the start of Mr. Game 7 right there, because he had that empty netter.
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately.
And I think it kind of goes under the radar, like you said, of just how good this team was then. Again, good blend of veteran talent and young talent, and is great.
Well, you take a look at the two teams, and we mentioned we have the Wikipedia pages up as well. But I just for reference, and I'm taking a look, and I'm looking at all the Hurricanes with Stanley Cup final experience: Martin Gerber, Glenn Wesley, Aaron Ward, Brent Hedican, Wallin, Mike Commodore, Oleg Tverdovsky, Kevin Adams, Rod Brindamore, Recchi, Eric Cole, Craig Adams. We forgot to mention Mark Recchi as well, but Corey Stillman and Josef Vasicek, all those players had at least one Stanley Cup appearance prior to that, the 2006 one. Then you take a look at the Edmonton Oilers, and the only two players who actually had any sort of experience in a Stanley Cup final was Dwayne Rollison, Radek Dvorak, three players because Rollison counts, Radek Dvorak, and Michael Pekka. And you go, man, just if. And I think that kind of, you saw the experience in Game 7. The Hurricanes came out to a 2-0 lead. I was talking to my dad before. You mentioned you were talking to your dad about some memories about it. I was like, that's a good call. I'm gonna talk to my dad too. And I just got off the phone with my dad, and he was just saying, like, the difference between Carolina and Edmonton at the time was Carolina came out ready for Game 7. There was something there for the Edmonton Oilers that they weren't ready, whether that was the inexperience, whether they felt down with their goalie out, which they shouldn't have because they just won in Edmonton at home. So you can always go back and go, like you mentioned, what if, but what a series this was. From the first game, it was back and forth. It was a close game until the worst moment in Oilers history happened, and when Marc-Andre Bergeron sent, who was it? Was it Eric Cole who went into Rolly? Do you
I
remember?
think so.
Yeah,
I think it was.
it was somebody like that, and tore his ACL. And a
Mm-hmm.
funny story as well, throughout the entire playoffs, I'd get on my street hockey pads. I'd get
Mm-hmm.
my Oilers.
BetOnline is your number one source for all of your pro and college football betting needs this season. And the Carolina Hurricanes are also heading into their 25th season here in Raleigh, and they have made a lot of moves this offseason and are looking really dangerous. So if you want to place a bet on those Hurricanes, your favorite football team, whatever, BetOnline is the place to do it. Find all of the latest football league developments, game matchup news, and podcasts, including this coming week's games. BetOnline is also your continued source for all of your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and more. The fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your favorite sports and events, including MLB, MMA, boxing, golf, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. Bet online, where the game starts.
Rollerson jersey on, and throughout the entire playoffs, all throughout the game, from the national anthem throughout, I always pretended to be Rolly. I was always the
Mm-hmm.
goaltender. I was always watching through the goaltender's eyes. And after that, after he tore his ACL, I was like, oh, now what? I actually had to
Mm-hmm.
sit down on the couch and watch those games, and really feel the pain from what I almost felt like I was living through Dwayne
Mm-hmm.
Rollison in a second body, watching from another the off the ice, really. And it was I think that was the turning point for the Edmonton Oilers, was that injury. Do you guys kind of see it that way? I know that that's the narrative here in Edmonton, is that if Rolly didn't get hurt, we would have won that cup. What's kind of the view there?
I could definitely see that being the case, because so often, heck, you just look at the Carolina Hurricanes past season when Freddie Anderson tore his I think it's MCL in Colorado right before the end of the season.
Right.
They still made it to game 7 of the second round of the playoffs. But had he not gotten hurt, maybe they make a bigger run. I don't know.
Right.
But I could definitely see that. I will say, one thing, that was brought up the other day when I had Mike Maniscalco, the Hurricanes play-by-play announcer, on,
Mm-hmm.
was at the time hockey was still very new in Raleigh.
Right.
The team moved here from Hartford in '97. Then they had the cup run where they lost to Troy, I think like 2001, 2002 season, and then you get this season here. So you have to talk to like a lot of like the older folks, again, like parents, essentially, because a lot of the kids or whatnot were exactly that, the kids, or they weren't
Yeah.
even born yet, which is crazy to think about. That team has been here for so long. But I definitely think it really comes down to that injury. I think if it could have gone either way, for sure. Obviously, it went to game 7. Of course, it could have gone either way, but it's crazy to think about. I think, like you said, that experience, I think at the end of the day, may have been what carried the team over the hump. You look
Mhm.
at your captain, Rod, he went in the mid 90s with Philly. Then he had that cup run early 2000s with the Hurricanes. And then, he finally gets over here. And then, like all the other guys you mentioned with cup experience for the team, then I think at the end of the day, that experience is really what got them over the hump, honestly, because had everyone stayed healthy, there's no telling what we're talking about.
100%, 100%. And I mean, I that summer was a summer the Edmonton Oilers brought in Chris Pronger and Michael Pekka, and I remember the buzz around
Mm-hmm.
Edmonton, going, you know what, this is the year again. It's going to be 1990 all over again in 2006. And I remember driving through, well, not me personally, because I was in third grade, but I remember driving from the grocery store back to my parents' place in South Side Edmonton, and there's people with signs going, honk for the Oilers, honk for the Oilers, and all you could hear is honk, 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 all the way down 23rd Avenue. It
Mm-hmm.
was And that was the other thing that I really got from my dad was he has been around the city when Edmonton wins. When
Mhm.
Edmonton is a playoff hockey town. I mean, now with the way that the Oilers are, maybe that'll start to change. But just with how poor the Oilers were for ever since the Stanley Cup final, people not necessarily didn't care about the Oilers, but everybody was just like, "Oh, it's the Oilers season again. We always had sold out stadium, blah blah blah." But you just felt something different. You feel something different when
Mhm.
it's the playoffs. Everybody in Edmonton has a smile on their face. You see each other going down the street and going, "Hey, how's it going? Oh, good. How are you?" And you're friends.
Mhm.
There's no animosity. You're not strangers. You're friends, and that's what that Edmonton Oilers team did. And that's what playoff Edmonton Oilers do to the city. And I think as for a young age like me, being able to see that camaraderie of the city. We had people down White Avenue hanging off of light posts going, "We want the cup. We want the cup." Like we got everything. And that was my dad said after the Oilers lost, he was torched. He was tired after for weeks because of the energy that the city was putting into it. That's how much this meant to Edmonton. And still you go back to those days and you still kind of see today just the pieces that are still lying around.
Yeah, it's definitely playoff hockey is definitely something else entirely. Because like you mentioned, Edmonton, they didn't make the playoffs from this Stanley Cup final till 2017. The Hurricanes, from this Stanley Cup, they made the playoffs once in between then and 2018-19 season, where they went to the conference final in 09 when the Penguins won.
Yeah.
So definitely both these teams after this cup just took a nosedive, honestly. And with us being at our age, a lot of our fandom has been in the no playoff time. The Hurricanes, whenever they came here, and we're in Greensboro, North Carolina, when PNC Arena was still being built, like that first game or whatever, a really good crowd. But after that, attendance, plummeted. The
Mm.
jokes that folks will make, oh, no fans, relocate to Quebec and stuff like that,
Wow.
like that, then very much the case. And then they slowly start getting their following, and they make playoffs the first time in 99. They go to the cup in 01-02, and then they win 05-06. And I do feel that was something that really cemented almost hockey here, or at least tried to. But then again, you go for so long just in mediocrity, and I
Yeah.
think it hurt the team, obviously, an organization like getting that foothold here, but they've obviously got it now. New ownership, new management, made the playoffs for 4 straight years. They got their franchise tentpole players. But in talking with my dad, about it, he remembers, day one in Greensboro, his white Hurricanes jersey. He bought it at Greensboro Coliseum in the first
Wow.
season. And you talking about your dad. I'll tell you what my dad said. He remembers, the excitement that was around of the team is like, they're getting going. Like, oh, okay, we actually got something going now. Because the Panthers had just lost in the Super Bowl a couple years prior, and I think the Hornets had just moved to New Orleans,
Oh
and we had just
yeah.
gotten the Bobcats before they changed their name back to Hornets, and they're trash. Don't even get me started on that. But Cam Ward breaking out, and going
Yeah.
on that run, cementing himself as NHL goalie. You can argue the Conn Smythe season was his peak. I know he got Vezina votes. I think he made the All-Star game once when it was here in Raleigh. I believe he was there.
Mhm.
But yeah, as I've talked about before, yeah, especially towards the latter days of him being here, no quality backups, constantly getting overplayed, playing hurt, not having a good team in front of him, and just his prime getting cut short
Yeah.
because of all that. But then again, yeah, also talk about Eric Stahl. He's coming off his 100-point season, leading the team in scoring in the playoffs. Rod Brindamore finally getting that monkey off his back. He's regarded as the greatest player in franchise history for a reason.
Mhm.
And the excitement of the team making the cup, counting down the seconds until they actually won when that final horn sounded. And yeah, just folks really embracing the team. I think if they were able to capitalize on that success, then maybe folks aren't just now taking notice, because obviously in the past few years it's become a hockey destination. With
Yeah.
Calvin DeHaan, he was like the really first big free agent that was brought in a few years ago, but now you got most recent one, Brent Burns, waiving his no trade clause to come here. And
Mhm.
it's obviously a testament to what they got going now. But yeah, the success of that season, I think, really goes under the radar. Like you mentioned, that whole just Stanley Cup final in general. Obviously, you can argue, it's two small markets. Obviously, the Oilers, much bigger deal in Canada than they are in the States. But Raleigh, North Carolina, small market.
Yeah.
We got two professional soccer teams in the area as well, but that's it. And actually, at the time, I don't even think they were here either.
Yeah, wow. Well, it's so I'm kind of getting lost, and not lost in it, but I'm just like listening to it all, and I'm putting myself back in that old Millwoods house of mine with the
Mm-hmm.
gross green tinted walls. I just remember how empty of a feeling it was.
Yeah.
It's really, it's cool to be able to years now down the road be able to hear somebody who was there, who was able to celebrate it, where so many of the people that I've been able to interact and connect with have all been Oilers fans and have all just gone, oh, it was the worst time.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to hear just like the other side of it, it's so cool. It's so, and that is the beauty of the sport. I think
Mm-hmm.
that a lot had to come about for that Stanley Cup to come together, but I think it was genuinely one of the best, if not the best, from the 2000s. And you see the outcomes that came from it. Obviously, the growth of hockey in North Carolina and even the states in general, even almost
Mm-hmm.
as well. You see the deterioration of the Oilers. I mean, right after that, Chris Pronger demanded his trade, was gone, went to Anaheim, won his Stanley Cup there.
Yeah.
Mike Pecco was gone after that year as well. It was the deterioration of that team, and then Kevin Lowe and Craig McTavish had to go and sit there and go, okay, who do we have to keep? And they kept the wrong guys for years,
Mm-hmm.
and became, as we call it up here, the decade of darkness. And it only took until 2015 for them to draft the greatest player ever for things to finally start to turn over and go, okay, now we might have a chance. Now last year was nice, and that was the big thing I think for Edmontonians for the last Stanley Cup run, I guess. Well, not even Stanley Cup run, for the last playoff run, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
was that it really reminded a lot of people of that team. I mean, you went into the Calgary Flames series, and the Oilers weren't supposed to win that at all.
Yeah.
And everybody just wrote them off. I wrote them off. I said the Flames were going to win in 7, and there you sat there and went, okay, this is an underdog team. And then they won, and then you go, oh, okay, they have Connor McDavid
Yeah.
and Leon Draisaitl, and you're like, oh, okay, maybe they're not so much. But you felt the city come alive again. You had the moss pit, you had the people outside of the media room going, "Let's go Oilers, we want the cup,"
Mhm.
I'm in, all these things that culminated together. I think really the reason why they culminated for so, or the way they did, is because of this 2006 Stanley Cup final. It took so long. And my dad even said, and we keep bringing up our fathers because I mean, I won't speak for you, but
Yeah.
for my dad personally, like he was a hockey fan before the Oilers came into
Mhm.
Edmonton, got set, like he was there when the Oilers were the Oilers in the 80s. And
Mhm.
so, like he said, like he's been so mad for so long after that 2006 Stanley Cup final because the Oilers just didn't do anything to try and get there again. And now they finally have a team that can finally do that. And that's been kind of the thing within the city since 2006, is just the feeling of, oh, the Oilers suck anyways. Oh, everybody in my generation has always gone, oh, I cheer
Mhm.
for this other team because throughout the years since 2006, the Oilers sucked. Like there was no reason. The
Mhm.
best player was Ales Hemsky for years. And when, no knock to Ales Hemsky, I love Ales Hemsky, but you sit there and you go, okay, this team is not fantastic. They're not doing anything to make the move, and you just sit there in mediocrity for so long. And Edmontonians got sick and tired of it, especially after seeing 2006. So I think that final, it was so important for the future of both organizations, positively and negatively as well.
Yeah, I totally agree there. Again, yeah, Hurricanes, aside from that one season, no playoffs
Right.
as well. It wasn't until I think 2015 when Sebastian Aho got drafted where it felt like, all right, we got something to cheer for because, Jeff Skinner, he kind of peaked early. Eric
Mhm.
Stahl, he was on the decline as well. Things just weren't clicking for him anymore. Same with Cam Ward, like we talked about already. But yeah, it definitely feels like this 2006 Stanley Cup was really what cemented, like a lot of folks around our age, at least here, uh, really got folks into hockey. Obviously, a lot of folks, didn't necessarily stick around with the Hurricanes per se, because again, team not being great. But again, a lot of folks still did, because the Hurricanes, even when they're bad, they still had good turnouts to the games, and the crowd was still loud. Yeah, may have been a lot of visiting fans there too, but the home fans were always very loud as well and supported the team. And like you said, you go around Edmonton, in those years, like, oh, the Oilers suck. It's the same thing with the Hurricanes for a long time. Folks not even realizing that we had the team. And especially like with like a lot of transplants moving in over the past few years, them not knowing about the team because the team hasn't been good. But again, in the past, 4-5 years, team really turning a corner and being a consistent playoff team and really finally starting to build.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it comes from your captain of that team is now your head coach, and having the right folks in place as well. He wasn't a player on that team, but Tim Gleason, now assistant
Mm.
coach, you know one of Rod's former teammates, absolute monster on the blue line for the Hurricanes back in the day. Having the right folks that know how to win. You talk about, the Stanley Cup experience on the team back then. You got that now too.
Mhm.
Gosh, trying to remember who all's on the team now, having had so much turnover. But Brent Burns having been to Stanley Cup. You got Jordan Stahl having won Stanley Cup before, Teuvo Teravainen. You got, oh gosh, who else do we have? Because we got
Forgot
so many
about
young
Tavo.
guys too, which is
Mhm.
definitely throwing me for a loop. Yeah, gosh.
I forgot about Tevu too. Tevu
Yeah.
is part of a very important uh Chicago Blackhawks team back then too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's got cup experience. Oh gosh, who else do we have? Derek Stepan, he's on a PTO.
Yeah,
I think he may be able to get a contract. Max Pacioretty, he's obviously hurt right
Pacioretty.
now, but yeah, again, it's just crazy to think about just how long it took these teams to finally capitalize, but they are, which I think is really important for obviously the teams and their future success, but just their markets in general. You go downtown now, and you see Hurricanes t-shirts, you see Hurricanes jerseys, especially during the season, like the little banners that people will hang from light poles.
Oh
You
yeah.
got Hurricanes ones, you got playoff ones. And the team is being embraced by the city. And I think that's really important, whether you're a day one fan like my dad, a fan that's been around, for since they're a little kid growing up and going to games like me, or it's a new fan. I think it's great that you got a team that's finally capitalizing on success the way they did in the previous era.
100%. I think we should maybe roll off with our favorite memory from that playoffs. Maybe let's keep it to the final. What was your favorite memory from the final? And if you say Dwayne Rolson going down, I will board a plane right now and come see you.
Honestly, I think it's a bit, well, there's two things. First and foremost, the Game 7 hype video with Nickelback. I think that was unmatched. I don't know how we haven't started talking about it until now, but
we still talk about that to this
that
day
is
here in Edmonton.
elite.
Oh, yes.
But honestly, I would say there's a reason he's one of my favorite players ever is Justin Williams getting that empty netter. When the team wasn't good, when he went to LA, I would watch LA because of him.
Mhm.
And then obviously the legend of Mr. Game 7 just continued to grow since then. But yeah, honestly, it's probably Justin Williams. And of course, just all of it, Cam Ward winning the Conn Smythe, Eric Stahl, having a tremendous just playoff in general. But for you, what was your favorite moment from that final?
Yeah, it's a little bittersweet, I guess, but for me, it would be the rise of Fernando Pisani and just the massive goals that he would consist the game winner. And what was it, game 2 or game 3, I believe it was. I can't remember when exactly he scored one of his big game winner. I think it was actually an overtime of one of those games too, and it just an Edmonton boy, a local kid. It was almost Mark Messier-ish, and it was his 1 year that he really sent off. He was the leading scorer in the playoffs. He was just the guy for the Oilers when they still had Mike Pekka, Chris Pronger, Sean Horkoff, Ales Hemsky. But it was this local Italian lad from Edmonton, Alberta, who came out and really just balled out for the Edmonton Oilers. And I mean, I believe it was the following year he ended up with colitis, and it kind of derailed his season and his career as well. And that was just, if you could keep one beautiful thing in your mind, is just Fernando Pisani and Ryan Smith just celebrating together, the toothless grin of Ryan Smith. And yeah, it brings back so many. That's why I brought out these jerseys today, because it's nostalgic. And I see Fernando Pisani and Ryan Smith in these jerseys, and it's the realization of the love of the game that you kind of had, and that was the growth of it. And now we're here, so yeah, I think that's really what it is Pisani and those nostalgic moments.
Yeah, it is definitely fun to look back on for sure. And now with both teams, like we've been talking about, they finally got the right pieces in place. It feels like it's only a matter of time before these teams get back to the Stanley Cup. Whether or not they play each other, that's obviously astronomical odds, but it could happen. These teams, they finally got the right guys in place to make another run. Do you get revenge? I don't know. Maybe, I go up 2-0 in the cup against you. But yeah, definitely those nostalgic moments. And you talk about Edmonton boy being the breakout player of those playoffs. with the way hockey is growing in Raleigh, I've been talking about it with team reporter Walt Ruff yesterday, Mike Maniscalco the other day, and NC State's head coach early in the week. Before too long, there's going to be someone from Raleigh like consistently in the NHL, the way this the game is growing here and the way the junior team is playing, and it's going to happen eventually.
Good.
And I think it all comes back to Stanley Cup.
100%. And it all goes back to the Stanley Cup, goes to the development, speaks to the development as well of the game down south too.
It really, really does. Now, Brett, where can my listeners find you on social media, and where can they find your show if they wish to share some memories with you?
Yes, please do. Please share some memories, because I mean, yes, it is a little bit of a sad nostalgia, but it's still nostalgic anyways. You can find me personally on all social medias at the real Holden 40, but you don't care about me. You care about the Oilers and the product on the ice. And you can find the show at Locked On Oilers on Twitter, exactly how it sounds. And if you haven't subscribed already to the podcast on YouTube, then what are you doing? You can find it at Locked On Oilers, exactly how it sounds, there as well.
And for any of your listeners that want to catch up with me and the Hurricanes, you can find the show on Twitter, Instagram at LO_Hurricane. Subscribe to the show on YouTube. You can find the show on whatever streaming platform you're listening to this on. And you can find me on Twitter at JaredEllis_96. It's been great talking to you, Brett. And I will send you pictures of all of my Stanley Cup stuff later, because I totally forgot to get some of that stuff out. But it was great talking to you. And let's go Canes.
You as well. Play La Bamba, baby.